The Homosexuals, with CBS News correspondent Mike Wallace.
Homosexuality is an enigma. Even in this era of bold sexual mores, it remains a subject that people find disturbing, embarrassing, and the reluctance to discuss it. Yet there is a growing concern about homosexuals in society, about their increasing visibility. In preparing this broadcast, CBS News commissioned a survey by the Opinion Research Corporation into public attitudes toward homosexuality. We discovered that Americans consider homosexuality more harmful to society than adultery, abortion, or prostitution. Most Americans are repelled by the mere notion of homosexuality. The CBS News survey shows that 2 out of 3 Americans look upon homosexuals with disgust, discomfort, or fear. 1 out of 10 says hatred. A vast majority believe that homosexuality is an illness. Only 10% say it is a crime. And yet, and here's the paradox, the majority of Americans favor legal punishment, even for homosexual acts performed in private between consenting adults. The homosexual, bitterly aware of his rejection, responds by going underground. They frequent their own clubs and bars and coffee houses where they can act out in the fashion that they want to.
Homosexuality is in fact a mental illness which has reached epidemiological proportions. In 1948, Kinsey said that approximately 28% of adult males have had, at one time or another, 1 or more homosexual contacts.
Dr. Charles Socarides is a New York psychoanalyst, a clinical assistant professor of psychiatry at the Albert Einstein School of Medicine, here lecturing to a group of resident psychiatrists on homosexuality. They are taught that no man is born homosexual, that it is not genetic in origin, not the result of a hormone imbalance. Rather, they are told that sexual behavior is learned behavior. And many psychiatrists now believe that homosexuality begins to form in the first 3 years of life, the result of early childhood experience. For the police view of homosexuality, we talked to Inspector James Fisk of the Los Angeles Police Department.
During the year of 1964, we arrested 3,000 homosexuals who committed their lewd acts in public places. I can state conclusively that the problem is growing. I'm concerned with the moral atmosphere in the community. And I am opposed, as a matter of principle, to making anything which is improper or immoral conspicuous. And by this conspicuousness, making it easy for persons to engage in this kind of activity.
By and large, homosexuals themselves agree with that view.
In our view, the enforcement of laws which forbid public sexual behavior or overt demonstrations of affection and so on that lead to a sexual stimulus in public view, laws against that are appropriate and should be maintained. Laws which protect the young from their elders so that the young can have the opportunity to develop sexually along their own lines and within their own framework rather than to have ideas induced upon them by others. These laws, we hold, are good.
In the United States, Illinois is the only state where such acts are legal. But nationally, as we said earlier, the CBS News Public Opinion Survey indicates that sentiment is against permitting homosexual relationships between consenting adults without legal punishment. The severity of the punishment varies from state to state. Most people think that homosexuality is confined to major cities. It is not. In 1955, there were reports of a homosexual underworld in Boise, Idaho. Population at the time, 34,000. The people of Boise tried to stamp out homosexuality. They discovered it couldn't be done. In the learning process, everybody suffered. It began with this headline in the Idaho Daily Statesman. The next day, the paper ran an editorial entitled, "Crush the Monster, Crush Homosexuality." The year-long investigation that followed shook Boise to its foundations. Everyone was suspect. Men were afraid to be seen together. Weekly poker games among men who had known each other for years were canceled. There were reports that many high school boys were involved. A prominent banker, a leading attorney were arrested, along with clerks, repairmen, salesmen. Altogether, hundreds were interrogated in this house on a quiet residential street. When it was over 15 months later, One homosexual was in a state penitentiary with a life sentence. 2 received 15-year terms, 1 10 years, 2 7 years, and scores of lives were ruined. Homosexual groups around the country feel the same way, and they're willing to stand up and be counted on the issue. Nonetheless, even though we live in an age of protest and demonstrations, this picket line in front of Independence Hall in Philadelphia on July 4th was met with a degree of disbelief.
Well, I understand that we're being picketed by a group of homosexuals. The policy of the department is that we do not employ homosexuals knowingly, and that if we discover homosexuals in our department, we discharge them. And that we have to exact standards of conduct which are far higher than the conduct of the general society in which we operate. This has to do with problems of blackmail and problems of personal instability and all sorts of things.
Let's face it, homosexuality is a problem, and these people are really advocating that we don't solve the problem. They're advocating that we tolerate the problem. And I think these people are a fit subject for a mental health program.
And homosexuality is just one of a number of such things, all tending towards the subversion, towards the final erosion of our traditional cultural values.
We have a sexual ethic which is the joke of the world. We are laughed at in every country of the world for our attitudes towards sex. The United States is living out some mad Protestant 19th century dream of human behavior. Instead of saying, aren't we wicked because we have a high divorce rate, or aren't we wicked because men like to go to bed with men and women like to go to bed with women, why not begin by saying that our basic values are all wrong? The idea of marriage is obsolete in our society. Everybody knows it. There are natural monogamists. There are people who indeed enjoy one another's company. But can you imagine a man and a woman who are told that for 60 years they're going to have to live together and have sex only with one another? This is nonsense. Why not begin by accepting the fact what human beings really are, men and women, which is we are open. We have something that André Gide referred to as floating sensuality. We can be aroused by this, by that, not necessarily by men, not necessarily by women. So let us begin with the reality of human relations and not start talking about moral fiber, because we're not living out this mad 19th century dream of that everybody, we must go in Noah's Ark in twos, one male, one female, and for 60 years in one another's company. This is what's at fault. This is breaking down, and I think that the so-called the breaking of the moral fiber of the country these commentators speak of is one of the healthiest things that's begun to happen.
The dilemma of the homosexual. By the law, that is a criminal, shunned by employers, rejected by heterosexual society, a displaced person, an outsider.